I stared blankly at the soft glow of the computer screen in front of me, my fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the keyboard. The clock at the bottom right corner of my laptop read 11:47 p.m., and outside the window of my Boston apartment, the city lights shimmered like distant, indifferent stars. I'd spent years building a life most would envy. My consulting business was thriving, my reputation impeccable. But in this moment, none of that seemed to matter. My heart pounded painfully in my chest, echoing the anxious turmoil within. I'd felt vulnerable before, but never like this, never to this suffocating extent. After a bruising divorce that had left me emotionally exhausted, I'd reluctantly sought professional help from Jenna Cooper, a therapist highly recommended by my closest friend. From our very first session, Jenna's empathetic presence had felt like a lifeline, a beacon guiding me through my emotional darkness. Over several weeks, I'd shared my most intimate fears and regrets, including deeply private details about my marriage, my insecurities, and the hidden fragility behind my confident facade. It had been healing, at least, that's what I believed until tonight. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me from my thoughts. Assuming it was a late-night client email, I reached for it absent-mindedly. The screen illuminated with a single, terse message from a familiar number. "We need to talk. Urgently." It was from Jenna. A pang of anxiety tightened my chest. Jenna had always maintained clear boundaries, never contacting me outside our scheduled sessions. What could possibly be so urgent at this hour? With an uneasy feeling growing in the pit of my stomach, I typed back, "What's going on?" The silence that followed felt oppressive, stretching painfully into minutes before my phone vibrated again, this time displaying a message so shocking I had to reread it twice. "I have recordings of our sessions, Abigail. Pay me $250,000, 0 cents by tomorrow, or your secrets go public." My breath caught, and a cold wave of disbelief washed over me, freezing me to the spot. This couldn't be real. Jenna, calm, reassuring Jenna, who had listened so carefully as I'd poured out my heart, now threatened to shatter my life? My throat went dry, panic rising fast, my pulse roaring in my ears. How had I been so blind, so naive? Desperately, I dialed her number, praying this was a misunderstanding or a cruel joke, but my call went straight to voicemail. I tried texting back again, begging for clarity, asking what this was about, pleading for answers, but Jenna remained silent. Each unanswered message deepened my dread, confirming the bitter truth. I'd been betrayed by the one person I'd trusted most. My mind raced frantically, spiraling into dark possibilities. My career depended entirely on my professional integrity. Clients trusted me implicitly, sharing confidential business details, confident in my absolute discretion. If Jenna exposed my private vulnerabilities, the anxieties, insecurities, painful secrets I'd foolishly entrusted to her, my reputation would crumble overnight. Imagine their reactions, the whispers behind closed doors, the stares of pity and disappointment at every meeting I'd ever attend again. Fear gave way briefly to anger, white-hot and searing, as I realized Jenna had carefully orchestrated this moment. This wasn't impulsive, it was calculated, precise, ruthless. She had waited patiently, listening week after week, recording my deepest secrets, strategically planning her moment of maximum leverage. And a fresh wave of humiliation swept over me. How many others had she done this to? How many other lives had she quietly dismantled, hidden behind her mask of compassion? In that instant, my despair hardened into determination. No, I thought fiercely, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. Jenna might believe she held all the cards, but she had underestimated one critical detail: my resilience. I would not be anyone's victim, least of all hers. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I opened my contacts, scrolling down until I found the name of a private investigator I'd worked with once on a sensitive corporate matter. It was late, but he owed me a favor, and I couldn't afford to waste time. Tomorrow morning, I would uncover exactly who Jenna Cooper really was, what dark secrets lay behind her polished exterior, and why she had chosen me as her target. If she thought she could destroy me without consequences, she was about to learn she'd picked the wrong person to blackmail. The next morning, I awoke with a hollow ache in my chest and the cold imprint of dread still lingering from the night before. My sleep had been fractured, haunted by vivid dreams, where Jenna's voice echoed over loudspeakers, reciting my confessions to faithless crowds. Even as sunlight filtered through my apartment windows, the reality felt no less surreal. I replayed her message again in my head. $250,000, 0 cents, by tomorrow or your secrets go public. There was no ambiguity. This wasn't desperation or bluffing. This was a threat from someone who knew exactly where to hit. And she'd chosen her moment well. When I was still reeling from divorce, emotionally vulnerable, and just stable enough that the thought of unraveling everything I'd rebuilt was paralyzing. Still, fear had a strange way of clarifying priorities. Jenna had already broken the most sacred code of her profession, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into silence. After a quick shower and a rushed cup of black coffee, I drove into downtown Boston to meet with Ray Chandler, the private investigator I'd worked with years ago when a client suspected a CFO of embezzlement. Ray wasn't warm or personable, but he was sharp, discreet, and effective. Exactly what I needed. When I arrived at his office, tucked between a bail bonds agency and a pawn shop, he was already waiting. He didn't ask many questions, just listened quietly as I laid everything out. Jenna's demand, the implication that she had recordings, the gravity of what was at stake. I kept my tone even, clinical almost, but inside I was shaking. After I finished, Ray tapped a pen thoughtfully against his notepad. "That's one hell of a move for a licensed therapist," he said finally. "You sure she's legit?" The question took me off guard. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "People reinvent themselves all the time, especially in mental health. If she's got skeletons, I'll find them. But if she's doing this to you, odds are you're not her first." That possibility hadn't occurred to me in full, and it chilled me. What if I wasn't unique? What if there were other women out there, blindsided and destroyed, their lives quietly dismantled behind closed doors? I handed Ray a folder with Jenna's address, business license info, and anything else I could scrape together from a late-night internet deep dive. "Give me a few days," he said. "If there's dirt, I nodded, stood, and paused before leaving. "Ray, whatever she's hiding, I need it airtight, no gray areas." He looked up. "Understood." Walking out into the cold morning air, I felt marginally more in control, but still deeply uneasy. I knew Jenna wouldn't wait long. This was a power play, and the clock was ticking. Back at my apartment, I opened my laptop and began organizing every email, calendar entry, and transaction that could prove a timeline of my appointments with Jenna. If she tried to twist my words or claim consent, I wanted irrefutable evidence that these sessions were confidential and professionally contracted. As I scrolled through old emails, I noticed something I hadn't caught before. Several of Jenna's invoices had come from an LLC with a different name, Osprey Integrative Health. Curious, I dug further. A quick search on the Massachusetts Business Registry showed the LLC registered under a different address than the clinic she operated out of. More surprisingly, it had been established only 18 months ago. That was strange, considering she'd claimed to have been practicing in Boston for almost a decade. The name on the LLC, Genevieve Cooper, caught my attention. Was Jenna short for Genevieve, or was this someone else entirely? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. People in high-trust positions didn't normally behave this recklessly unless they were hiding bigger secrets. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind kept drifting back to the conversations I'd had with Jenna over the months. In hindsight, I noticed subtle red flags. Her avoidance when I asked about her background, the way she always redirected when I mentioned her education, the fact that her degrees on the wall had no school names, just generic frames with PhD in clinical psychology. I'd been too emotionally raw to question it then, but now, everything felt suspiciously curated, like a set design rather than a professional space. By the next morning, Ray texted me, "Come in, we need to talk." Those 5 words hit like a bolt of electricity. I was in his office within the hour. He laid out a file on the desk and opened it without a word. Inside were screenshots, documents, and newspaper clippings that painted a version of Jenna I never saw coming. Her real name was indeed Genevieve Cooper, and she had once been licensed in Pennsylvania, until she lost her license in 2017 for ethical misconduct. Ray handed me a photocopy of the disciplinary board statement. The charges included improper dual relationships with clients, unauthorized use of session recordings, and allegations of manipulation for financial gain. She had vanished shortly after the hearing, changed her name, and relocated to Boston, registering a new business under a new identity. Her current license in Massachusetts? Not the credential ID she displayed in her office was linked to a completely different therapist who had reported identity theft last year. The room felt like it tilted sideways. So she's not just unethical, she's operating illegally, I said slowly. Ray nodded. She's a fraud in every sense of the word, and a damn good one. My hands were ice cold. All that trust, that sense of security, the tears I'd shed in that perfectly staged office, it was all built on a lie. She's done this before, I said aloud, more to myself than to Ray. And unless someone stops her, she'll keep doing it. Ray leaned back, folding his arms. So what now, you want to report her? I shook my head. Not yet. She threatened me. If I go to the authorities too soon, she could leak everything out of spite, and I'll still be the one with my life in ruins. I need leverage. Ray raised an eyebrow. What kind of leverage? I exhaled slowly. The kind that makes her wish she'd never picked me. For the rest of the day, my mind churned with plans, half-formed strategies, and what-ifs. Reporting her would be justice, yes, but it wouldn't be enough. Jenna had chosen to violate the most sacred trust between a therapist and a patient. She didn't deserve the benefit of quiet consequences. If I was going to reclaim my power, I needed to outplay her at her own game, and that would require something far bigger than revenge. It would require a calculated, public, and undeniable collapse of the world she'd built for herself. And suddenly, I knew exactly where to begin. The idea had started as a whisper, just a faint, reckless notion that drifted through my thoughts like a shadow. But now it had taken shape, clear and solid. I wasn't just going to stop Jenna. I was going to dismantle everything she had built on lies. She had violated something sacred, weaponized trust and pain for personal gain, and thought she could walk away clean. That night, after Ray's revelation, I sat in my living room for hours, lights off, laptop open, staring at the online profile for Osprey Integrative Health. Jenna's clinic had polished branding, glowing testimonials, and a false veneer of professionalism so convincing it made me sick. But behind it was fraud. Behind it was theft. And I was going to make sure everyone knew it. I started digging into the clinic's finances. It wasn't hard. Jenna hadn't exactly covered her tracks. Public property records, tax filings, and business registries revealed a surprisingly fragile structure. She owned the clinic's office space through a shell company, one that was significantly in debt. The mortgage was past due by 2 months, and several liens had been placed against the business for unpaid vendor contracts. That explained the glossy facade. She was desperate, financially drowning, and had likely resorted to blackmail because her entire empire was hanging by a thread. That gave me an opening. I contacted a real estate attorney I trusted and explained the situation, carefully omitting names and motivations. I posed as a potential investor interested in acquiring distressed healthcare properties and asked what it would take to quietly purchase the debt attached to Jenna's building. The attorney, intrigued by the opportunity, promised to look into it. Meanwhile, I kept going. I reached out to several former clients whose names I recognized from social media testimonials, people who had praised Jenna's guidance during difficult times. I used a burner email, phrased my message carefully, and offered to cover any legal costs if they were willing to talk about their experiences. Most ignored me, but one woman replied. Her name was Lacey. She agreed to meet in person at a quiet coffee shop just outside the city. She was younger than I expected, early 30s, with tired eyes and the kind of cautious energy that told me she'd been through more than her share of betrayal. After a few awkward pleasantries, she cut to the chase. "You said you were her patient too?" I nodded. "And she threatened me. Told me she had recordings and would release them unless I paid." Lacey blinked rapidly, clearly holding back emotion. "She did the same to me. I thought I was the only one." She went on to describe how, after a few months of sessions, Jenna had hinted that she knew things that could damage her professionally, then leveraged that into financial pressure. "I didn't have money," Lacey said bitterly. "I took out a personal loan, 25 grand, just to make her stop." I felt something cold and sharp settle inside me. Jenna had done this more than once. She was running a pattern. Finding vulnerable women, grooming their trust, then extorting them when they were at their weakest. This wasn't unethical. It was predatory. Armed with Lacey's testimony and copies of her emails with Jenna, I began building a file, a dossier of everything Jenna had done, all the lies, all the victims, every trace of manipulation. I included Ray's research, the fake credentials, the disciplinary board documents, the financial records, even photos of the office with the doctor diplomas. But I didn't want to just take her down quietly. I wanted the exposure to be undeniable, irreversible, public. I reached out to a local investigative journalist, someone who specialized in medical fraud and had covered high-profile healthcare scandals in the past. Her name was Savannah Knox, and when I pitched the story anonymously, attaching redacted excerpts of the evidence, she responded within hours. This could be massive, but I'll need more. Names, documents, interviews. I told her I'd get everything she needed, but I asked her to wait to time the story with what I had planned next. The real estate attorney came through faster than expected. Jenna's clinic was officially 2 months away from foreclosure. Through a third-party holding company, I made an offer to buy out the debt and assume control of the building lease. Legally, it was clean. Ethically, I wasn't sure anymore, but I couldn't afford to care. If Jenna wanted to use leverage, I'd show her what real leverage looked like. Within 2 weeks, the paperwork was signed, the debts acquired, and I had full legal ownership of the building in which she operated. She had no idea. She still thought she held power over me. That illusion wouldn't last much longer. On a gray Monday morning, I walked into the clinic with a sealed envelope and a thin smile. Jenna was at the reception desk, chatting with her assistant. When she saw me, her face shifted, masking her surprise poorly. "Abigail," she said, all faux warmth, "I wasn't expecting you." I handed her the envelope without a word. Inside was the legal notice of change in property ownership, along with a formal demand for vacating the premises within 30 days unless a new lease agreement was negotiated. With me. Her eyes scanned the document, her skin paling with every line. "What is this?" she hissed. I kept my voice even. "I own the building now, and your practice, if you want to continue it, goes through me." Her lips parted in disbelief. This is harassment. This is illegal." I raised an eyebrow. "What's illegal is impersonating a licensed therapist and blackmailing your clients. Shall we talk about that instead?" Her face contorted into something feral. "You don't know who you're messing with," she spat. "Neither do you," I replied. I turned and walked away, pulse steady for the first time in weeks. That moment marked a turning point, not just in our power dynamic, but in my own sense of control. Jenna had underestimated me because I'd come to her broken. She had never seen what I looked like whole. That night, I called Savannah and told her I was ready. I sent her the complete file, unredacted, with my name at the top. Let the world see what kind of monster had been masquerading as a healer. Let them hear my story, not as a victim, but as someone who decided enough was enough. Jenna Cooper thought she could ruin my life with silence, but now it would be her own lies screaming the loudest. Owning the building where Jenna operated her fraudulent clinic gave me more than leverage. It gave me the upper hand in a game she thought she was playing alone. She had no idea her empire was already collapsing beneath her, and I wasn't about to warn her. I let her stew in confusion after I handed her the notice. Let her rage build and her control slip. She didn't know what to do next, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The first time since this started, she was the one scrambling for footing, and I had no intention of giving her solid ground. I spent the following days preparing for the next phase. I wasn't content with just taking away her clinic. I needed to pull apart every thread she had woven into her web of lies. That meant going deeper, finding out how many people she had victimized, and making sure they had the courage and tools to speak. I started contacting more of Jenna's former clients, using a carefully constructed message of shared experience and support. Most were hesitant, understandably afraid. Who wants to admit they'd been manipulated and exploited by someone they trusted to heal them? But Lacey's testimony helped. Once she agreed to go on record, others slowly followed. I promised them anonymity if they wanted it, and legal protection where I could provide it. I wasn't just seeking justice for myself anymore. I was building a case that would leave Jenna with nowhere to run. At the same time, Savannah and her team at the local paper began quietly verifying every detail of the evidence I had sent. She called me regularly, asking for clarification, sourcing, additional context. She was sharp, ethical, and relentless. Every time I thought I had given her everything, she found another angle, another inconsistency in Jenna's story that needed exposing. She tracked down Jenna's former supervisor in Pennsylvania, the one who had filed the original complaint against her years ago. He confirmed everything, said he always knew she'd try to reemerge under another name. She was too arrogant to disappear for good, he told Savannah. People like her believe they're untouchable. That arrogance had been Jenna's downfall. She hadn't just deceived people. She'd done it with smug confidence, assuming no one would ever look behind the curtain. But now, the curtain wasn't just pulled back, it was gone. Still, I knew Jenna wouldn't go quietly. The moment she learned that the building she worked in was no longer hers to command, she began retaliating in small, petty ways. She called the building's utility providers, trying to shut off services. She filed a false police report accusing me of harassment. She even posted a vague but venomous public statement online, claiming she was the victim of a targeted campaign by a disturbed former client. I could almost hear the panic in every keystroke. She was spiraling, and every move she made only confirmed her guilt. I stayed quiet. I didn't respond, didn't engage, didn't feed her fire. I didn't need to. The truth was already spreading, and the story hadn't even gone public yet. Savannah was holding the article for the perfect moment, the moment when Jenna's image was most fragile, her support system thinnest, and her defenses non-existent. Behind the scenes, I was working with the attorney who had helped me buy the building to draft a new lease agreement. It was ironclad, absurdly expensive, and filled with clauses that would allow me to evict Jenna at the first sign of violation. I had no intention of letting her stay, of course, but I wanted her to feel the pressure. To know that every corner she turned, I was already there. I had her assistant served with the lease paperwork just after closing hours. Jenna didn't show up to the clinic the next day. Her staff looked confused, unsure if they should open the doors or not. I told them calmly that the clinic was under new management and that anyone who had been unaware of Jenna's licensing status should consult legal counsel. That afternoon, her receptionist quit. 2 days later, the therapist Jenna had hired to support overflow clients sent me an email saying she'd been lied to about Jenna's credentials and wanted no association with the clinic going forward. Jenna's inner circle was crumbling, and it was happening faster than even I anticipated. And then, without warning, Jenna called me. I let it ring twice before answering. "What do you want?" I said flatly. Her voice was strained, low, like she was trying to maintain control and failing. "We need to talk," she said. "Not through lawyers, just us." I laughed once, bitterly. "Like the last time you wanted to talk?" There was silence on the line. Then she said, "This is going to ruin both of us." I couldn't help myself. I genuinely laughed this time. "No, Jenna, this is going to ruin you. I'm already rebuilding." Another pause. "What will it take for you to drop this?" she asked. Her voice cracked just enough to betray her desperation. "Drop what?" I said. "The truth?" I ended the call before she could respond. I sat back in my chair, staring out the window. The skyline looked different now. Sharper, somehow clearer. It wasn't done. Not yet. But I was close. Jenna thought this was a negotiation. It wasn't. It was a reckoning. Savannah called the next morning. "We're going live on Friday," she said. "We've confirmed every claim. We've got the state licensing board to comment. We even interviewed 2 former clients under alias. It's airtight." I felt something settle in my chest. Relief, maybe, or anticipation. "There's more," Savannah added. "Jenna just filed a trademark complaint against a paper. Said we're defaming a licensed medical professional." Our legal team laughed her out of the room. I smirked. Of course, Jenna would try a last-ditch legal tantrum. She was out of moves, and she knew it. Savannah's voice turned serious. "Abigail, when this goes live, it's going to be big. She's going to lose everything. Are you ready for that?" I paused. Was I? The part of me that still remembered what it felt like to cry in that office, to confess things I'd never said aloud, to believe I was safe. She hesitated. But the woman who had clawed her way back from betrayal and fear who had built a campaign of justice brick by brick. She was ready. "I am," I said simply. That Friday morning, I woke before sunrise. My hands were steady as I opened the news site and saw the headlines splashed across the top. Unlicensed therapist accused of blackmail fraud, Boston clinic owner under fire. Jenna's photo, smiling, polished, and utterly false, sat above paragraphs detailing her lies, the victims, the stolen identities, the broken ethics. The article was brutal, factual, and devastating. My name appeared halfway through, attached to a statement I'd given the reporter. When someone weaponizes your pain, they forfeit the right to silence. The piece spread like wildfire. Social media lit up with outrage. The licensing board released a statement within hours, launching a formal investigation. Jenna's clinic website went offline before noon. And I exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. It wasn't over. Not yet. But the world finally knew who Jenna Cooper really was. And I had only just begun. The hours after the article dropped were a blur of notifications, messages, and emotions I hadn't anticipated. My phone didn't stop vibrating. Texts from friends who had seen the story, emails from strangers thanking me for speaking up, others asking if they could share their own encounters with Jenna. It was overwhelming, but affirming, like standing in the eye of a storm that I had spent weeks preparing for. The woman who had once sat paralyzed in her apartment, terrified of what might happen if her secrets got out, was gone. In her place was someone who had taken those secrets and turned them into ammunition, not to hurt, but to protect. And people were listening. The newspaper's website was flooded with comments, and within 24 hours, other news outlets picked up the story. Jenna Cooper, or rather Genevieve Cooper, was trending locally, her name suddenly synonymous with fraud, manipulation, and betrayal. It would have been satisfying if it didn't also make me sick. I wasn't celebrating her downfall. I was just watching it unfold like the inevitable consequence of a long chain of her own decisions. By Monday, the licensing board had issued a cease and desist, ordering Jenna to suspend all practice immediately pending investigation. The building's utilities, which she had tried to weaponize against me just a week earlier, were now legally under my control, and I had the locks changed. I sent a formal letter notifying her that her access was revoked and that all business operations tied to her name on the premises were terminated. I expected rage, I expected threats. What I got was silence, not a single word from her. No email, no legal notice, nothing. It was eerie. For someone who had fought so hard to control every narrative, her sudden disappearance felt less like retreat and more like preparation. I couldn't trust it. I began scanning forums, online groups for therapists and health professionals in the area, watching for any mention of her resurfacing under another alias. I knew her type. This wouldn't be the end unless I made it the end. But even as I stayed on guard, other doors began to open. Two of Jenna's former clients reached out with interest in joining a potential class action lawsuit. I referred them to an attorney I trusted, someone with a background in malpractice litigation. She reviewed the files and said, "There's more than enough here, but this isn't just civil, this is criminal." That word sent a quiet chill through me. Criminal. It was one thing to expose Jenna publicly, another entirely to see her face charges. I hadn't thought that far ahead. At first, all I wanted was to stop her from hurting anyone else. But now, as the pieces continued to fall into place, I realized she might actually have to face legal consequences for what she'd done. It wouldn't erase the pain she'd caused, but it would at least make her accountable. That meant something. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to what came next for me. I'd spent so much time focused on tearing Jenna down that I hadn't planned what I would build in the aftermath. The idea came one afternoon as I was organizing files related to the clinic. Real files, not fabricated ones. I realized there were good people on staff, professionals who had no idea what Jenna was doing behind closed doors. Therapists, assistants, even cleaning staff. All left unemployed and confused by the scandal. I had the space, the licensing connections, the business experience. What if I opened a legitimate wellness center in the same location, one built on transparency, ethics, and actual healing? I reached out to a few of the former staff. Most were wary, burned by the association with Jenna, but two agreed to meet. We sat in what used to be the clinic's lobby, now stripped of its branding and fake certificates, and talked. They were honest about their concerns, but cautiously hopeful. "If you're serious about this," one said, "we'd be proud to work here again, for someone who gives a damn." That night, I drafted a proposal, a real one, the Abigail Morgan Center for Recovery and Resilience. It felt surreal typing my own name into a vision I hadn't imagined until recently. I sent it to a few colleagues in the business and healthcare world for feedback, and the response was immediate and supportive. One of my oldest clients offered to help fund the renovation. "You turned your trauma into something meaningful," he wrote. "People need that, especially now." I didn't cry when I read it, but I came close. The idea that something good could come out of everything Jenna had tried to destroy, it gave me hope. It gave me purpose. Of course, Jenna didn't stay quiet forever. 2 weeks after the article ran, a video surfaced online. It was a grainy clip posted anonymously to a fringe video site. Jenna, sitting in a hotel room, tearfully proclaiming her innocence. She called the accusation slander, claimed the recordings were misinterpreted, and insisted that I had orchestrated the entire scandal out of revenge. Her voice cracked. She looked genuinely distraught, but the comments section wasn't buying it. "What about the fake credentials?" one user wrote. "Why'd you change your name?" said another. My favorite simply said, "Nice try, Genevieve." The damage was done. No one was listening anymore. She had lost control of the narrative, and there was no getting it back. But watching that video, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Not forgiveness, not regret, just the faint ache of recognizing a person so consumed by her own lies that she couldn't even see reality anymore. Jenna had built her entire identity on manipulation and illusion, and now that it was gone, there was nothing left. And maybe that was the greatest justice of all. Not her humiliation, not the legal consequences, not even the collapse of her business, but the simple truth that for the first time, she had to live without the lies. She had to face herself. And that, I suspected, was far more painful than anything I could have orchestrated. Still, I wasn't naive. I kept records of everything, kept Savannah updated in case Jenna tried to twist the story again. I was cautious, prepared, but I didn't live in fear anymore. The shame that had once paralyzed me, the fear of my secrets being used against me, it was gone. Jenna had tried to control me with silence, but I had taken my voice back, and in doing so, I had found something even more powerful than revenge. I had found clarity. And so, when I stood in the newly painted office space 2 weeks later, holding the keys to a building that had once symbolized my betrayal, I didn't feel haunted. I felt proud. Jenna's name was gone, scrubbed from every corner. In its place, a new sign would soon hang, one that didn't pretend to heal while quietly destroying, one that actually helped people heal. The fight wasn't over, but it was finally unmistakably mine. By the time the 6-week rolled around after the exposé dropped, the name Jenna Cooper had become radioactive. Even the most oblivious clients had caught on, and her old website, which once boasted polished photos, glowing reviews, and lofty mission statements, was a broken link leading to a 404 error. She had gone dark, completely off-grid, and yet traces of her damage continued to ripple through the lives of those she had touched. Emails still poured into Savannah's inbox, and mine, from patients across the country, some who had worked with Jenna under other aliases, others who were too afraid to go public but found comfort in knowing they weren't alone. The depth of her deception was staggering, and each message confirmed what I already knew. I had done the right thing. Still, it didn't feel over. Not yet. The morning it all reignited started quietly. I was reviewing construction quotes for the interior redesign of what would soon become the Morgan Center for Recovery and Resilience. The old therapy rooms were being reconfigured into open, collaborative spaces. The front lobby was stripped of every trace of Jenna's fake degrees and sterile branding, Where once sat symbols of manipulation and illusion, I would build transparency and trust. I was halfway through an invoice when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but instinct told me this call mattered. I picked up. The voice on the other end was quiet, male, hesitant. "Miss Morgan, I'm calling on behalf of the Massachusetts Attorney General's office." I straightened. "Yes?" The voice continued, professional, but waited. "We've reviewed the article published last month and your submitted complaint. We've also received several corroborating statements from others who were impacted. I'm calling to inform you that we're opening a formal criminal investigation into Genevieve Cooper for practicing without a license, fraud, and extortion." For a second, I couldn't speak. The man went on, outlining the scope of the investigation and asking if I'd be willing to provide sworn testimony. I said yes, without hesitation. After we hung up, I sat in silence, my fingers frozen on the desk. This wasn't just exposure now. It wasn't just social consequence or professional disgrace. This was legal, tangible. The law had taken notice. The thought of Jenna standing in a courtroom being forced to answer for the lives she'd tried to ruin brought a kind of closure I hadn't dared imagine, but it also came with weight. I knew that testifying meant reopening every wound in public, recounting every manipulation, every fear, every humiliation, but I also knew I wasn't the same woman who once sat terrified of a phone message. I was stronger now, and I wasn't alone. Savannah called the next day, already aware of the AG's decision. "It's happening," she said. "They'll move fast. If you need media support, let me know. And Abigail, thank you for not giving up." I thanked her too. Without her, none of this would have had the platform it needed. After we hung up, I pulled out a blank legal pad and began writing everything I remembered. From the first session with Jenna to the last voicemail she ever left. I wrote down how she looked at me when I cried, how calm and calculated her voice was when she delivered the threat. I wrote the names of the other women who had shared their stories, the exact words Jenna used, to gaslight, to coerce, to silence. I wanted it all documented. Every detail mattered now. This wasn't just about punishing her, this was about truth. But Jenna, of course, didn't vanish quietly. About a week after news of the investigation began circulating in professional circles, she resurfaced. Not in person, she wouldn't dare show her face in Boston, but online. A heavily edited YouTube video appeared on a throwaway channel, titled, "The Truth They're Hiding." In it, she appeared in what looked like a rental apartment, pale and visibly thinner. She framed herself as a victim of cancel culture, blamed the media for targeting a woman in a male-dominated field, and said she was suffering from mental and emotional trauma caused by slanderous lies. She didn't name me directly, but she didn't need to. "One former client with a vendetta," was all she said. I watched the entire video without emotion. Every word was textbook manipulation, a desperate attempt to redirect the story. But it didn't work. The comments were merciless. Viewers weren't sympathetic. Some had read the articles, some had seen Savannah's follow-up coverage, and others were victims of therapy abuse themselves. "Take accountability," one wrote. "You're not a victim, you're a predator." I didn't respond. I didn't share the video. I didn't even acknowledge it publicly. I didn't need to. Her last weapon, narrative control, was gone. And then came the subpoenas. The Attorney General's office served her with formal charges: practicing without a license, falsifying credentials, and extortion. I was contacted again and told I would be one of the primary witnesses. Lacey would testify too, as would another woman who had come forward recently with an eerily similar story. The trial would take months to build, but momentum was on our side. For the first time in years, Jenna would have to answer to someone who couldn't be manipulated. No legal loophole or performance could shield her now. In the midst of all this, the Morgan Center opened its doors for the first time. Not to patients yet, but to partners, advisors, and the small group of survivors who had helped expose Jenna's deception. We held a quiet, private gathering. There were no photographers, no reporters, just people who had been through hell and decided to rebuild. We stood in the main therapy room, newly painted in soft earth tones with sunlight streaming through wide windows, and shared our stories. There was laughter too, relief, Closure. For some of us, the scars would never fully fade, but we had turned pain into purpose, and that mattered. As I stood in that room, I thought about how close I had come to paying Jenna the money. How, on that first night, I'd nearly crumbled under the weight of fear and shame. I thought about the silence she counted on, the way she gambled that I would choose to disappear rather than fight. And I thought about how wrong she had been. She thought she was choosing her next victim, but she chose the wrong woman. And now the truth was louder than her threats could ever be. She could run from headlines, from buildings, from her past, but she couldn't run from accountability. It had finally found her, and it was just getting started. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. A sterile, restrained place where emotion had no room to breathe. The day I took the stand, the silence was heavy, dense with anticipation, and every eye in the room was on me. I felt their stares, not with fear, but with clarity. I had rehearsed what I'd say dozens of times, gone over every phrase, every memory, every piece of evidence with my attorney until it became muscle memory. But standing there looking into the eyes of the woman who had tried to break me, I realized I didn't need a script. I just needed the truth. I told them everything, how I met her, how I trusted her, how she had coaxed out every painful memory and weaponized it. I explained how she had recorded our sessions without consent, how she had issued threats through late-night messages, and how she had demanded $250,000, 0 cents, in exchange for. I told them how I discovered her fake credentials, how she'd done the same to others, and how she had constructed an entire life out of manipulation and fraud. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just told the truth. And when I stepped down from the witness stand, I felt lighter than I had in years. The trial lasted 4 weeks. Testimonies piled up. Mine, Lacey's, others who had come forward through Savannah's reporting. A forensic expert confirmed the audio recordings were authentic and taken without consent. The licensing board confirmed she had never been credentialed in Massachusetts. The prosecutor laid out her pattern like clockwork, and with each day, her defense unraveled further. Jenna sat there, stone-faced, her eyes fixed ahead, as if she could hold everything together with the sheer force of denial. But no mask holds forever. When the guilty verdict came, there was no outburst, no breakdown, no last-ditch speech, just silence. She was convicted on multiple counts: fraud, practicing without a license, and extortion. Sentencing was scheduled for a month later, but I didn't attend. I didn't need to. I had already gotten everything I came for. Justice wasn't a sentence on a sheet of paper. It was what had unfolded in the months before, the truth made visible, the damage acknowledged, the survivors believed. Back at the Morgan Center, we quietly marked the moment. I didn't want a celebration. I wanted reflection. We held a small support session that evening with some of the women who had been involved in the case. We didn't talk about Jenna. We talked about healing, about what came next. For all of us, this had never really been about punishment. It had been about reclaiming what was taken, our voices, our peace, our belief in ourselves, and we had done that, piece by piece, day by day. The center was now fully operational with licensed therapists, peer support programs, and a sliding scale fee system to make therapy accessible to women from all backgrounds. It was everything Jenna had pretended to be and more, and it was real. Sometimes I still get messages from women I've never met who've read about the case or seen the story online. They tell me they've been through something similar. They ask how I found the strength to fight back. I never have a simple answer because the truth is I didn't wake up strong. I became strong because I had no other choice, because I got tired of being afraid, because I refused to let someone else decide the meaning of my pain. And if my story helps someone else find that same strength, then it was worth every moment of fear that led to it. In the quiet moments, when the center is closed and the halls are still, I walk through the building alone. I stop at the door that used to lead to Jenna's office, now repurposed as a space for trauma recovery workshops. I think about everything that happened in that room. The betrayal, the violation, the manipulation. And then I think about everything happening there now. Healing, honesty, resilience. The contrast is stark, but it's not haunting, it's empowering. That space no longer belongs to a lie, it belongs to the truth, and so do I.